Florida Governor Rick Scott just signed a law that welfare recipients should get drug tests before they get their hands on that taxpayer-funded welfare check. The governor says it's unfair for taxpayers to subsidize drug addiction. Joining me now is Howard Simon from the Florida ACLU, which is suing to strike down the law. Sir, thank you for joining us tonight. Sir, so what do you have against testing a welfare recipient before they're given their welfare check?
Well, we still have a Constitution in this country, and the Constitution requires that the government not subject people to searches until they have some reasonable suspicion of wrongdoing. There's been pronouncements from the U.S. Supreme Court on when drug testing can take place without suspicion. They mostly require
hold on. Go ahead. When can they?
When there is a safety-sensitive employer engaged in work with dangerous equipment, or where they are required to carry a gun as part of their job. There has been one case involving a decade ago when one other state, Florida is the only state to try to attempt this now, after a decade ago when the state of Michigan tried to impose suspicionless urine testing on welfare applicants, and the federal court struck that down as unconstitutional.
Okay. All right,
I mean,
so
I don't
let me
want to
ask you
sound
this.
completely.
Let me ask you this, sir. Is my employer allowed to drug test me?
It depends on whether your employer is a government employer or a private employer. It depends on whether your private employer is governed by a collective bargaining agreement.
There
or
you go.
A state
Bingo.
that has
I was waiting
statute.
for that. I was waiting for it. That's what it comes down to, because a collective bargaining prohibits this sort of thing, if I'm not mistaken.
No, no. This is
not in theory, but in
is,
practice, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. Collective bargaining is relevant for the private sector. This is the government that's doing this.
The government is barred from doing this. The
government is barred from doing this because of the Fourth Amendment, not because of a collective bargaining agreement.
I'm trying to get to the point where I want to specify who's allowed to be drug tested and who's not. And by the way, why isn't everyone allowed to be drug tested when you work for a private company?
If there's no prohibition against it, then the private employer can do that.
All right, so no, why can I not test a welfare recipient to make sure he or she isn't taking that welfare check and going to the corner dealer and saying, here's my check, I'm going to sign it over to you, just give me some methamphetamine?
Because if you're the government is governed by the Fourth Amendment that prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures.
How is that unreasonable? How is that unreasonable to say, hey, look,
that's what
this check is so that you can sustain yourself, and maybe you have a little boy and a little girl that need food and need milk and need water, and here's the check, not so that you can go out and get high.
Why are we focusing only on welfare recipients? If your concern is about whether government money is used for its intended purpose, there are business people on contracts, students on scholarships, sports teams on subsidies. There's lots of state monies that are being used. We ought to be more concerned about all of that.
Yes.
We're focusing only
fantastic. The
on
ACLU is agreeing with me. That's fantastic. I say make it legal to drug test anyone you want.
Yes, and what about and just throw the Constitution out the window?
No, it's not. If it's not unconstitutional for a private employer to drug test me, why is it unconstitutional for me to say you can't have this check until you're...
We are not talking about a private employer. This is not about... I don't know what you want to talk about.
Right, but we should be using the same standards, sir. That's all I'm saying.
Well, you're wrong about that. The Constitution applies to government. The Constitution doesn't apply to the private employer. These are two different subjects. You are insisting on...
I think the Constitution should apply equally across all sectors. All right, we're going to have to leave it there, sir.
The Constitution doesn't.
We'll bring you back. I enjoyed having you on. Will you come back and join us again sometime?
Sure.
I'll take that as a definite yes. Let's bring it out to the panel. Dr. Hellman, I hear you're shaking your head in the background. They told me you're shaking your head. You're agreeing with this guy?
Of course I'm agreeing with him. You don't want the government having that sort of control in your life. And he makes a very good point. If we're going to drug test welfare, what you call welfare recipients, welfare simply means you get more out of the system than you're paying in. Why aren't we testing college students? Why aren't we testing anyone who... No, we're not. As a basis for getting financial aid, no, we are not. This is stigmatization of the poor, and there is something profoundly wrong with that beyond Fourth Amendment violations.
Wait a minute. I'm not so sure. You know, I don't know that it's stigmatizing the poor. I think you should be able to drug test where and when you need to, when it's relevant.
Eric,
like when you're about to take your driver's license exam, I'd like to make sure you're not wasted on a quart of whatever before you start driving. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. These civil liberties protections are just getting out of control.
I don't want the government in my life. I don't want the government telling me that I need to take a drug test.
You're receiving welfare money. Government money. You're receiving government money. You're involved. I mean, I don't understand your argument.
What are you... well, let me explain it to you, since you didn't understand it the first time.
I didn't.
You are making an argument that if you receive government funding, then you should be drug tested, which means we would be testing college students.
Are you addressing the safety concerns here?
Can I finish? Can I finish?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Doc.
So if you use your logic, then you would be testing financial aid recipients. You would be testing anyone who receives unemployment benefits.
We're not opposed to it. But we have to start somewhere. It's not a problem if you're not a drug dealer.
Well, let's start with the poor. You know, let's start with stigmatizing them and calling them all drug dealers. And then let's throw out the Constitution.
Dee, part of the problem is the recipients are getting taxpayer money.
See, exactly.
We're all paying into it.
Yeah, we're all paying into it, and her argument is flawed because I worked at the White House.
Financial aid,
listen, please. We all had to get drug tested. Listen. Zero drug tolerance for the executive office of the president. Everybody got drug tested. Not everybody was poor there, so your argument doesn't make any sense.
That's a good point, Doc. There it is.
You get drug tested, by the way. Everyone who works for President Obama gets drug tested, so why can't recipients of government money be drug tested too?
If we're going to take your standard, which again you've proposed, that everyone be drug tested, then we would be testing millions of Americans.
No, that's
not only would it be a violation of the Fourth Amendment, it would also be prohibitively expensive, and it wouldn't be feasible. If you ran drug tests on my students receiving financial aid, I will guarantee you the entire educational system would be shifted.
Someone email in and let me know if I'm wrong, but wasn't the Fourth Amendment in place so that government can walk in, kick your door in, and start looking around, see if they can find anything? Isn't that the real flavor behind the Fourth Amendment?
Search and seizure applies to many different things, and I can't think of something more invasive. I can't think of something more invasive than being forced to take a drug test.
I was forced to take a drug test.
Perhaps going to the airport.
Anyone who works for President Obama has to take a drug test, so your argument makes no sense.
And last words, Smitty, but so under the liberals' definition of the Fourth Amendment or interpretation, I shouldn't have to wait in line in security line when I go into an airplane.
Well, I think what you're not addressing here, I gave you your time. Hold on. There are safety concerns here. We have evidence that welfare money on a regular basis is used in the wrong way. There are children who don't get fed because those dollars are used elsewhere.
Lying. You are stigmatizing the poor, and you are lying right now, and I will not take that.
There are statistics that prove this fact. These are not my thoughts.
Provide them. Please provide them, because you are making that up.
We're going to have to leave it there. You two, we're going to have to keep you. It's a good thing you're separated by 3,000 miles. That's all I have to say. Coming up.
And logic, separated by logic as well.